Mel Kiper Jr. has now doubled down on what he said about the Chicago Bears. We break that down next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube and rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast, especially Apple Podcasts. You go out there, rate it 5 stars, and you are one of 58 that will be in the running for the Darnell Wright jersey, which we'll announce the winner live on this show. What's going on, everybody? I want to break this down because this is something we talked about last week, and Mel Kiper said this last week, and now he said it again. Now he's doubling down on what his opinions are with the Chicago Bears. And what are those opinions in particular? Let's take a listen, shall we?
You have no second-round pick, so some maneuvering could take place there. And if you trade Justin Fields to Atlanta, you could get the 8th pick overall. So you could have 1, 8, and 9 field and be able to recoup a second-round pick by trading down with one of those 2 picks, either 8 or 9. So a lot of maneuverability for the Bears either way field. But if it's me, I'm taking Caleb Williams number 1 and trading Justin Fields.
So you heard it again, right? And we talked about this last week. He mentioned the number 8 pick overall going to the Bears. And last week when we listened to what he had to say, it seemed very almost like in the heat of the moment, he was getting amped up and he was saying like, oh, and then you'll trade it. The Bears will get the 8th pick, right? And just kind of saying things to say things because Kiper's not necessarily like a true, I mean, he's kind of an insider, quote unquote, like very loosely, because there is some people say that he can kind of change the narratives because he is in the national spotlight. So sometimes people tell him things to like, oh, this person's getting a lot of hype. This person's getting a lot of hype, right? But I think right now, the way that I see this, the reason why I think that he's doubling down on this like number 8 pick is he was very high on Justin Fields. A lot of people were high on Justin Fields. He said last year that he felt that Justin Fields was the QB1, like would have been QB1 last year, and that's why the Bears shouldn't or that's why he was saying that the Bears should trade the 1st pick overall, because he was saying that, hey, Justin Fields was better as a prospect than any of these other quarterbacks. And that's not crazy to say at all. Justin Fields was high on a lot of people's boards. And he doubled down, though, saying that, hey, the Bears should draft Caleb Williams and then trade Fields for that super high pick. Do I think that someone who we had highly regarded would go number 8? Now, you could look at, hey, Ryan Pace is in the Atlanta front office, and he was really high on Justin Fields and might want that, and Justin Fields balled out against the Atlanta Falcons. Overall, though, when's the last time that we saw a quarterback go for a top 10 pick? Go for a top 10 pick that really hasn't, that still has a lot to prove. I think that's the big thing. Like if someone's willing to move on from them, not just like a Deshaun Watson situation where it's like, all right, you got to go. Everyone knows that you're a stud, but things just haven't worked out. So the number 8 pick, I think it's for the situation. I think that's a little unrealistic, but let's talk about what might actually be a realistic scenario. So I think it's fun, and we broke it down last episode, what would happen if they did get the number 8 pick. But let's think about what if they traded Fields for a 1st-round pick? Because if you think about it, what would you be able to get for Justin Fields? Well, Sam Darnold went for like a 2nd and a day 3 pick. So if Justin Fields is a better player than what Sam Darnold was, and he has a higher ceiling than what Sam Darnold was, and he has proved more than what Sam Darnold did. And Sam Darnold, I believe, was actually still going through that 4th season. So for all intents and purposes, you have a 2nd and a day 3, so you might get maybe a 2nd and a 3rd, something like that. And what does a 2nd and 3rd kind of equal? Well, if you're trying to trade into the late 1st round, it might be that 2nd and a 3rd. So that's where I kind of wanted to look at the later portion of the 1st round to kind of see, is there any deal that we would make with a team that succeeded and was in the later part of the 1st round? And when you look at this, right, this is not a fully set draft order, but Baltimore, no. San Francisco, no. Detroit, maybe. I can't see them necessarily trying to move off of Goff for Justin Fields, but maybe drafting someone that would be more up their alley. Buffalo, Kansas City, Philly, no. Arizona, no. Green Bay, no. Dallas, no. Houston, no. Miami, no. But here's where it gets interesting. Pittsburgh, Rams, and Tampa Bay. Now, Rams, I don't think so because they traded so much for Stafford. They really do believe in him. But Tampa Bay, they do have Baker. Even though that they say Baker's the guy, Baker has played well. But would they be looking for someone to kind of upgrade? But Pittsburgh, to me, though, when all is said and done, Pittsburgh, to me, is the one team in the kind of the later rounds that really has a chance to maybe try and trade for Justin Fields. Because it's the 21st pick, they have been struggling to find somebody that can give that city life at the quarterback position, and Justin Fields could potentially bring that. So if you're looking at a late round pick, I don't think it's that far off to say Pittsburgh might be a trade. Maybe you trade a 4th round pick with it or something like that. But I think that if the Bears were to get a 1st round pick for Fields, I think it's more likely that it's going to be a Pittsburgh than anything else. But if you continue to go up, right, it's Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Seattle, but then you start getting back into the top 15, right? The Vegas, the Denver, Minnesotas of the world, where then you're kind of talking about that super high kind of draft pick. But because of that, I just kind of wanted to say, let's just kind of have fun with this, right? What if Pittsburgh wanted to move on and wanted to get someone like a Justin Fields and kind of take that shot saying, hey, this is a really, really good team. And what if we get someone that could potentially kickstart this, that we have good wide receivers. We feel like we have a solid line. We feel like we could potentially get the most out of them. So let's just say that the Bears traded and got the 21st pick in the draft, because I kind of wanted to go through who is potentially available, because this also just helps us better understand the NFL draft. So who would be available if the Bears did get that 21st pick? Now, just looking at a simple consensus big board of who might be out there, first off, there's a handful of good offensive tackles that still might be around inside of that range. So Marius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia, Talis Fuaga, the tackle out of Oregon State, and also Troy Fontenot, the tackle out of Washington. 3 good tackles that the Bears could get with that 21st pick. But also, if the Bears wanted to get more wide receiver help, Brian Thomas Jr. and Keon Coleman. So Brian Thomas Jr., big body wide receiver out of LSU, fast speedster, could take the top off of a defense. He's someone that I really like that you could easily get at that 21st pick. And ironically enough, the Steelers are projected to take him with the 21st pick. But Keon Coleman is the way I would describe him is he's kind of like an Odell Beckham Jr., where he's supremely talented. He can make these incredible contested catches, but he doesn't create a lot of separation. And to me, he's got a super high ceiling and a super low floor where he might not even make it out in the NFL. But if he does, this guy is incredibly talented, and that's why he's the 18th overall consensus prospect. Now, besides those, there's a handful of cornerbacks: Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, and then also Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington, is kind of in that 20-ish type of a range on the big board. But then other than that, Chop Robinson is also projected to go around that area. The defensive end out of Penn State, and also Braylon Trice. So really, there's some good players out there. And if you're watching on YouTube, let me know, do any of these players entice you with that 21st pick? What I'm trying to get at, though, is that there's a lot of good talent that you can still get, that you can still take a swing on. Some good tackles, some good defensive ends, and then also some solid wide receivers. And from my perspective, I don't have my wide receiver rankings up right now, but those wide receivers, I have a lot that are kind of projected to go in that later first, early to A2, and something like this, the Bears could really take advantage of. But to me, still, Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU, really seems to be that guy that would be available with that 21st pick that would be really worth taking a glance at. But let's talk about some mock drafts, just because I wanted to throw two kind of fun ones together about what could you do if Justin Fields was able to go for the 21st pick overall. So I was using PFF's mock draft simulator because I could make the trade. I could force the trade with them so that it ends up happening. So I kind of wanted to go through two different scenarios, because what happens if you traded away Justin Fields? Now, for both of these, I took Caleb Williams with the first pick overall, but for one of them, I wanted to stay put with the 21st pick, and the second one, I wanted to trade back. And I wanted to kind of just explore what options we would have with these picks. So if we went Caleb Williams first, then with the 9th pick, you're really kind of looking for a receiver help. Rome Odunze most likely going to be there, but he's rising up a lot of draft boards, the wide receiver out of Washington. We talked about him before. Think Mike Evans. But then Brock Bowers, one of the best tight end prospects, who could play a little bit of that slot role for you, and also more of a 2 tight end set if the offensive coordinator wants that. So you could get some receiver help right there. There's also some tackles, but I'm more of a fan of why not try and get some of that wide receiver help. But now when we go to the 21st pick, like we talked about who would potentially be there, but if the Bears stayed put, to me, Brian Thomas Jr. would be a great target. I think that he's a very, very good wide receiver. And if you're trying to build around Caleb Williams or whoever the Bears end up going with the quarterback, if you traded away Justin Fields, you probably should take someone with the first pick at least, or something like that, so you at least know who the guy is. But Brian Thomas Jr. to me is the pick if you were to go with a wide receiver. I just like the idea of doubling up and really solidifying that wide receiver group. But then with the 75th pick, I always like to do 3-round mocks. Safety, Javon Bullard, just kind of threw him out there. Very good safety that you can get in the 3rd round to potentially replace Eddie Jackson and just add some depth to that safety position. But on the other one, I traded that 21st pick away. And this is where I do think that it's a little bit more realistic to say that what would the Bears could potentially get a late first, like that 21st pick overall from the Steelers, because in this draft, we traded that 21st pick for the 34th pick and the 68th pick. And my reasoning behind that was maybe the Patriots didn't get the quarterback that they liked. So they traded back in. So they drafted like a Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 3rd pick overall. And then they trade back in because they want to get Bo Nix or a quarterback like that, right? So if they trade back in, what can the Bears do with those draft picks? Well, like we said, there's some really good receiver talent at that beginning of the 1st round. And someone who I think if the Bears end up going with the offensive coordinator out of the Seattle Seahawks, who reminds me the most of DK Metcalf? Xavier Legette, the wide receiver out of South Carolina. Big body, deep ball receiver, straight line runner. Very, very, very similar to DK Metcalf that I think Shane Waldron might really like if he becomes the offensive coordinator. But then with the other pick, the 68 pick, I went Brendan Rice, wide receiver out of USC. I am just overloading the wide receivers just so that we have a lot of weapons. And then just for the heck of it, I was like, I'll throw in a running back. For the 75th pick, I went with Jonathan Brooks. So ultimately, I have one draft that was just Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., and Javon Bullard. So really solidifying that wide receiver core. And then with the trade back, we came away with Caleb Williams, Brock Bowers, Xavier Legette, Brendan Rice, and Jonathan Brooks. So let me know what you think. Which one is your favorite? Do you like the trade back? Do you like the stay put? Do you think that it's realistic that the Bears would actually trade with the Steelers with Justin Fields? Because I think it's actually a little bit more realistic, but I think overall still that number 8 pick overall trade back for the trade, it just doesn't seem realistic. I wish it could be realistic because it makes, if the Bears move on from Justin Fields, a lot more palatable because you get a top 10 pick for him. But still, I think at least that 21st pick it does seem in the ballpark, like I mentioned, because it's about the same value of a second-round pick and a third-round pick combined. So, only time will tell, though, shall it? So make sure to like and subscribe, though, out there on YouTube if you enjoyed this show and enjoyed watching this. We go live on Wednesdays and Sundays at 7:30 on YouTube, so I hope to see you there. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair and